critique is so limiting and emotionally draining. I'm hoping you find something to explain what's happening.
Which one's better, 1 or 2? Better, worse, no different.
No different.
I'm quite curious to know what you think.
I think sober hasn't been good for him.
Pierce was in the full bloom of alcoholism here.
Exactly.
Never should have quit drinking.
No originality. No courage. My opinion.
I can't save you.
I found something.
Who did these? Mesmeric.
A guy upstairs, he died.
And you just took them.
He had no family or friends.
I can make you rich.
It's brilliant.
Demand has people ready to kill.
Have you ever heard of an artist named Ventral D's?
No, not in our records, and we have everyone.
The artist used blood to create the reddish blacks.
You ever notice anything about this painting? You look at it long enough, it moves.
As I research these, I'm starting to think there's a disgust for the world of money.
He spent decades in a psychiatric hospital for the criminally insane.
There is some sort of power. Some spirit. It's connected to his art. Something truly goddamn strange is going on!
This is a slaughterhouse.
Are you aware that Dee's asked that all his art be destroyed?
Get rid of it. Box it off.
I can't save you.
People thought she was part of an exhibit. We're trending on Instagram. It's a major hit.
That was the trailer for Velvet Buzzsaw, an art world thriller by filmmaker Dan Gilroy, who is known for writing and directing Nightcrawler and Roman J. Israel Esquire. And so I am here with Robert Yaniz Jr. of the Crooked Table podcast to break down this very eclectic trailer and just kind of share our thoughts about the film and its distribution platform on Netflix and what the reaction is going to be like coming out. So thank you for joining us, Robert.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, definitely really curious to see how this film ends up turning out when it hits Netflix.
Yeah. I mean, when I started watching this trailer, like I kind of had 3 different reactions to it because the first 30 seconds of the trailer is like, oh, this is a really nice movie set in the art world. It looks really shot well. It looks really pretty. It has a great cast. It's kind of almost feels like a parlor room drama just set in the art world. And then in the middle of the trailer, things start to get a little darker and you're like, okay, it's going to deal with themes of greed. You know, it's going to be a commentary on the art world and like a character study. And then the final third of the trailer just becomes like a slasher film. And it actually fully embraces the supernatural elements. Because when it took a darker twist, I didn't think there's going to be any supernatural stuff. I just thought it was going to be a story of greed and betrayal and trying to profit off of a dead artist's discovered work. And so it was such a roller coaster ride just watching a 2-minute trailer. I can't even imagine what the final film is going to be like.
Yeah, and I hadn't even seen this trailer until we were talking about doing this episode here, and I'd heard a lot of positive buzz coming out of Sundance, and so I had to watch it a couple times just to really wrap my head around what's going on, because it opens with Gyllenhaal doing playing yet another sort of quirky, eccentric character, but it does play sort of like a grounded adult thriller for most of the first half, and then like launches into full-blown like Black Swan level surrealism, which I'm a huge fan of that movie in general anyway, as well as Gilroy's work with Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler. So just the pedigree of this film kind of already had me on board. But now seeing what he's trying to do as far as making it a satirical horror thriller with this like insane ensemble cast and this really kind of scattershot tone, I'm definitely gonna have to check this one out.
Yeah, I don't know if this is an apt example, but this just popped into my head. The movie Get Out,
Yeah.
which is also a satirical horror thriller. I think like when you watch the trailer for that movie, it starts out looking like a character drama with a bit of comedy, and then it goes places. And I guess I'm really excited to see that happening as a trend in films and not just as a one-off example or a risk taken by one filmmaker that isn't followed through on by other filmmakers. Like, and these are the kinds of stories that I think have the most potential to be impactful or fun or smart or fresh. I mean, we get tons of blockbusters and superhero movies in the theaters, but for people who want a feature film that covers different material with a different tone and different characters and a completely, just from a completely different perspective with a different voice, the movies like Velvet Buzzsaw and Get Out are seeming to try to deliver that. And in the case of Velvet Buzzsaw, we're seeing it using the platform of Netflix, which I think is really exciting because just knowing the culture around the studio system and theatrical releases, it would be very hard to get this movie funded for a theatrical release because pitching it, you're like, well, it's a character drama and it's a satire and it's a slasher film and it's really, really quirky and unconventional. And, Dan Gilroy is known for being a bit of an eclectic filmmaker. It would be very hard to get this movie made, but because of Netflix and because they're flush with cash and ready to invest, we're getting a lot of really original stories that I'm actually starting to get more excited about.
Yeah, I mean, you take Roma, for example, which is now nominated for Best Picture, I think 10 Academy Awards. A film like that, no one's going to choose to go see a black and white foreign language film that about, a maid working in like an upper crust Mexican family on a Friday night, but having it accessible to, everyone that has a Netflix subscription has really opened up the level of exposure that Cuarón's film, which ironically is best seen on a big screen. But I mean, it's available in a way that it would not, it would not be exposed to so many eyeballs if it was just purely, exclusively to theaters.
Yeah, and a recent instance of Netflix's success with producing original feature films is with Bird Box. And while Bird Box is questionable in its creative integrity, it showed that there is a market for theatrical level movies on a streaming platform because I think something like 30 million or 40 million people watched it on within its first week or weekend. And that's something that none of maybe like 5% of those people would actually go to a theater and pay to see it. But because it's on Netflix, it has its niche in the horror genre or thriller genre, and it's well marketed, it's new, you put it on the Netflix front page, people will watch. I think what's great about Netflix, and I was actually just talking about this on the Gate World podcast for the Stargate site I work on, it's like Netflix is basically cutting out the middleman, which is the theatrical chains, where it's like you have to get in a car and pay for a $12 ticket and buy popcorn and go through this process to see a movie. Netflix is just saying, here's the content, pick what you like and watch it, and we'll take that data and we'll make more. So in that sense, the films that have the most quality or appeal are the ones that are most rewatchable, or people, that share, people when they share with their friends, when there's a good word of mouth, then their friends watch and that gets logged as a data point. That content is allowed to thrive in a way it most likely never would in theaters. And I have a feeling that Velvet Buzzsaw is going to do well in its first few weeks on Netflix, simply because it is so fresh and different and bizarre and unique in its creative voice. I have high hopes for where it's going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the difference is populist film versus films that are more likely to develop a cult following. Like you take something like Mandy, for instance, that to me feels like it, as visually imaginative and detailed as that film is, I feel like that in a way would have benefited from a direct to streaming. Actually, in fact, I think it was a VOD release primarily, and then developed from there into a limited theatrical one as well. But Netflix is really providing a home for quality content that is not going to appeal to people of all ages, to the Marvel, Star Wars, Disney crowd, essentially. and that's getting them in kind of hot water with the theater chains in a way, because AMC has, they do their Best Picture showcase every year, and they're including all 7 of the 8 films. Guess which one's not included, that are nominated for Best Picture this year. And I think it's starting to, we're kind of reaching a tipping point where theater chains and streaming services are going to have to kind of work hand in hand a little bit more. So the fact that Velvet Buzzsaw is perpetuating one side of that equation, I think is a big testament to the strength of this delivery system, which is, basically what Netflix has become.
Yeah, and we're also seeing a model with these Netflix movies where they are still having a limited release in theaters. Like I know Roma had kind of like a simultaneous debut on Netflix and in theaters, and Velvet Buzzsaw is going to have the same. And this dates back to, I think, Beasts of No Nation. Unless I'm mistaken, that movie was also released in theaters. Because there's a rule that you need to release it in theaters to qualify for the Oscars, right? And that's
Right.
really important for these prestige pictures.
Yeah, it's really just, I think, kind of a token qualifying run, just so they can, they can basically say, see, it was in theaters now, give it some awards contention. But you take something like Nightcrawler, which was the previous Dan Gilroy, Jake Gyllenhaal, and Rene Russo, all 3 of them coming back for this. That film will only cost $8.5 million, and it grossed $32 million. Imagine how small that audience is compared to if Velvet Buzzsaw has the kind of impact that Bird Box had, which I think it's going to attract a lot more attention in a lot of ways, just because of the cast and because of everyone that's involved behind the scenes on this. Plus, like I said, it taps into that niche audience, so that all the horror fanatics are going to be all over this as soon as it drops.
Yeah, and I think, like, obviously this is less social it's more cultural commentary than social commentary, as presented by the trailer. So the comparison with Get Out is a little thin, but like my thought, why Get Out was so successful is because it looked like it was going to make a statement on a cultural zeitgeist, and it was going to, you see what I'm saying? It wasn't just superficial entertainment. It had depth, and it was going to say something in a way that hadn't been said before. In terms of the art world, I feel like this is going to take a not so self-serious approach. As we've seen before, it's going to take a more campy genre slasher approach to making this kind of commentary. And I'm also excited about the creative voice behind this, because Dan Gilroy is a very interesting person. I mean, he's part of the Gilroy family, which is Tony Gilroy, who's the writer-director. He did all the Bourne movies, and he wrote and directed Michael Clayton. And John Gilroy has edited a ton of really good films, and all 3 of those are brothers. And Dan Gilroy is actually married to Rene Russo, who is like a really, really popular model, and she's been around this, high life culture. So like these people are very familiar with the world. The creatives behind the story are very familiar with the world they're seeking to depict. And I think that's where good art will come from, and people share a part of their experience in life and package it in a movie. And it's not just one person, it's not just Dan Gilroy. It's Dan Gilroy and his brother's editing it, and Rene Russo is in it, Jake Gyllenhaal, John Malkovich, Billy Magnuson, Toni Collette. I mean, this is star-studded, and just looking at the trailer, you want to watch it. I mean, I can't see anyone seeing this and be like, yeah, that looks like a dud, or that doesn't look interesting. I've seen that before, I just think it has such a cool appeal. And,
if you're looking just for supernatural insanity and seeing all kinds, like, first of all, you have that hobo man imagery, which is really creepy just off the bat. I've seen pictures of it before I watched the trailer. I'd seen pictures of it online, and I had no idea what that was in context. But also, as you were saying, I think he's really going to hit the themes of criticism and kind of, in a way, almost how art kind of supersedes the critics, and the art takes a life of its own. Like, there's a lot of subtext and text, I guess, to this film that I think is speaking to how, speaking to the power of not necessarily the creators, but how the creation surpasses the impact of the person that makes it, and I guess takes over all those who want to bring a critical eye to it. I mean, literally, the trailer opens up with Gyllenhaal looking at a piece of art and getting ready to like tear it apart. And then by the end of the trailer, the art is literally tearing people apart. So I think, I think Gilroy is going to have a lot of fun with that as a content creator himself and as a filmmaker. So I look forward to reading into everything that this film has to say about, what it's like to have a creative voice and have others whether it's now, especially now on social media, kind of put in their 2 cents and try and tear down your vision.
Yeah, it's funny. The trailer actually ends with the line, "We're trending on Instagram. It's a major hit." That moment where the girl puts her arm in that big silver ball at night when the exhibit is closed, and whatever spirit is inside there kills her, and then she bleeds out all over the floor, and people think it's part of the art display.
Right.
And it ends with saying this is great. It's a hit. I mean, it's real. It's a real dead person, but it's it's worth it because we're trending on Instagram. I kind of think of recent movies in the last few years like Ingrid Goes West that is starting to kind of starting to observe the social media culture and how it's to be infamous is better than to be never famous at all. Like Roger Stone says, it's really sad that our generation has embraced that. They want to be known at any cost. And with movies like Ingrid Goes West, and then reality giving artists plenty of inspiration with the Fire Festival. I know there's a few documentaries out, one of which is doing really well on Netflix. I think we're all kind of waking up to the superficiality of our culture, and Velvet Buzzsaw is going to dig its teeth into that, no pun intended, pretty heartily.
Yeah, and it feels like Velvet Buzzsaw is to the art world what Nightcrawler is to the media in general.
Yes,
because that
totally.
film really focused on a lot of what you were saying about as far as getting famous no matter what the cost and the lengths to which you will go to do so. And I think that's a theme that, whether I mentioned Black Swan already, but things like Whiplash, things we're seeing a lot of films that are really exploring, all right, you want to be famous, you want to be great, this is what you need to do to get there. Is it worth it to you? That kind of thing. And I feel like Velvet Buzzsaw is going to turn the lens on the art world as sort of a microcosmic commentary of a much larger point.
It's funny. I actually really don't watch horror much at all. It's kind of a personal thing. I was raised without it, and it's just I kind of prefer not to let that kind of imagery and tone into my life, if that makes sense. Some people get a thrill out of it. It just kind of weighs on me in a way. I know it's really pathetic, but that's
No,
personally how I feel, to be spiritually healthy. I'm going to break that rule probably several times over to watch this movie because I don't care how much it scares me or whatever, how much it weighs on my soul. I have to see what this does.
Yeah. I mean, and we don't have very long to find out now at this point. How the film's gonna turn out, but I agree with you. I think that this is probably one of the ones I kept hearing the most about just on film Twitter, just from film critics and stuff coming out of Sundance, being either enraptured by the film or just having very complicated thoughts, but everything that they were saying sounded interesting, I think is the point. There are people like us that are going to be actively waiting for this, and there's going to be a significantly more people that are just going to stumble across this. What, a Jake Gyllenhaal movie? He's going to be in that new Spider-Man movie. What's he doing here?
Well, let us know in the comments section what you thought of Velvet Buzzsaw and if you're planning to see it. Where can listeners find you? Where can they find your podcast? And where can they find you on social media?
So you can find me on Twitter at Crooked Table for the Crooked Table podcast. We air every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Odyssey, ODYSY1.com. And you can also find all the episodes and everything I have going on crookedtable.com.
Well, thank you for coming on at very short notice and having this discussion with me. And we'll hope to have you on the show again sometime soon.
Yeah, anytime, man.